Hello and welcome to the channel. This is The Art of Prepping, and I want to talk today about bug out bag supplies, various items to consider. In fact, I have a little over 100 items that I want to briefly go over, just some things to consider to put in your bag. This video is more for the beginner, but it's really important to start somewhere. And the big picture of things, especially when you're looking at preparedness or the genre of preparedness, the bug out bag really isn't that important to have. It's good to have, I have a couple of them, but it's not everything. It's just a very small fraction of preparedness. But it's a really good exercise for the beginner to kind of understand what all their needs may be and how to fulfill them. And so here we go, the bug out bag, things to consider, and I'm going to just jump right into it and just say, a lot of times when you go camping, there's things that you'll notice that you don't have. And I think that that's a really good exercise as well, is to take your bug out bag once you think you got it completed and go out into the woods or go camping with it for a couple of nights and just see how it works. I mean, that's, sometimes you have to go and actually live it, go through a trial run, a dry run, if you will, and just see how it works out. And some of these things are going to really pop out that I'm going to say to you. You may not think they're important now. And by no means do I think you need to have this entire list in your bag. I don't think so at all. In fact, you probably don't even need close to even like half of this stuff. But I'm just going to bring up a bunch of ideas here, and then you just kind of pick what you think you need, and then go out there and live or for a few days in the woods, and then see if you're correct or not. So bug spray. I mean, wow. That's something that I've put off for many years, putting in my bag. And I've now come to the conclusion, though, that it is essential, at least in my area. Certain times of the year, you just kind of have to have it, or you're going to really get eaten up. And it's no fun at all. In my opinion, though, look for bug spray that's natural. It doesn't have a lot of chemicals in there. Just do the best you can with that. The next is lip balm. Definitely that, and like sunblock. It's just going to go a long way to kind of prevent injuries, especially in this situation to the skin. Sunburns and having, lips that are actually so dry that they're actually, bleeding is really not something you want to be dealing with during a bug out situation. And I mean, before I get too much further, I just kind of want to define what I think a bug out situation is. It's a situation that you need to leave your home or work or something and go to another safe location. Of course, ahead of time, you want to have several places that you can go at any given time. And so really a bug out bag is getting you from point A to point B. And hopefully you can get there as quick as possible. You're not going to want to linger around or set up a big base camp. No, in fact, really, you don't even really want to set up camp at all. You may want to just take a quick nap if you've been on on a trail for a day or two or something. You might want to take some rest from time to time. But if the goal is to get to location B, then there's no reason to set up a big camp and sleep all night. Things like that don't make sense, especially if it's an emergency situation. You want to kind of be strategic about this. You don't want to injure yourself. So therefore, you do want to take some breaks and rest, but you don't want to just be setting up a big camp and as if you're going to stay there for a week. That just has, no logic behind it. So bug spray, lip balm, sunblock, first aid kits, and this doesn't have to be that elaborate. I mean, especially if it takes you a day or two, for example, to get from point A to point B. I mean, there's no reason to be carrying like 400 Band-Aids. Doesn't make sense. So you can, on some of these things that I'll be speaking about, you don't have to carry much of it or any of it at all. But, in some cases, some people just feel more comfortable having it, or it's a situation that if you don't have a lot of skills to deal with certain situations, you may have to have that material support. So definitely first aid kit and then trauma kit. Of course, For a lot of people, they don't even know how to use some of the elements in a true trauma kit. So that's something that you're just going to have to learn. And but it is important to have it, especially if you're kind of away from any help, or if you're by yourself. You definitely want to have some trauma kit, supplies. A needle, definitely, to get out like splinters and so forth, or tweezers as well. That also can help you get splinters out. Iodide. Iodide, now this kind of gets a little more technical, but it is something you can take if there is a possibility of radiation exposure. It helps to kind of block up the thyroid. The thyroid is very sensitive to radiation. So you want to protect that by keeping it from absorbing anything. And so that's just something to consider as part of pretty much a nuclear preventative if there was a nuclear event. And so CPR mask. Now, some of this sounds a little bulky and some of this is, but some of this stuff, like a CPR mask, you can get them now that are just really, really compact. It's basically just a sheet of foldable plastic, right? Or some type of like silicone. I've seen different types. And there's like a one-way valve. And you basically just put this over their face, right there above their mouth and their nose. And of course, line up the hole into their mouth and then basically just breathe through the one-way valve. And basically, it's not like rocket science here, but it's something to protect yourself in case they have some type of disease or something. Bug net, or mosquito nets. It's just some type of netting system to keep, the pests off of you if you have to travel at certain times of day when they're worse, than others, or certain times of the year when they're worse than others. A shamag or a bandana or a sniper veil. Now, they're all different types of clothing, or I should say cloth, but they all have uses. And I'm not saying you should have all three, you might want to just pick one, but in some situations, you might want to have a couple of them. And so shamags and bandanas can cover body parts, just like a sniper veil, but a sniper veil actually can help to kind of camouflage as well. And as well as you can see through it a lot easier. There's just a lot of pros and cons with both, or all three really. So just want to check into that. In terms of like having a change of clothing, I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, do you need to have multiple change of clothing? Not really. Unless it takes you a whole week to travel somewhere, to get to location B. But I would probably, imagine that most people's location is just a day or two away, walking distance, or, some people's situation, they're just get in their car and bug out there, or get on a bicycle and go that way. So there are some people who won't even be on foot. But for those who are, just kind of know your limitations, and don't be trying to put so much in your bug out bag that it's just difficult to carry and they can cause you injury. So you want to watch out for weight and bulk in your bag. The change of clothing for me personally, I think, it can be something as simple as just a few extra pairs of socks, right? And maybe an extra pair of just like a shirt, and maybe pants possibly. And there's all kind of lightweight stuff out there, so you don't have to worry about a lot of weight on that if you look for various options. Rain gear or ponchos, definitely. You definitely want something. And really, some of this rain gear out there that's available now is so lightweight. You don't even know you have that. It's literally like a few ounces or a couple ounces or so. And of course, if you got really desperate enough, you could just take if you got desperate enough, you could get like a trash bag and put it over you and kind of do like a makeshift poncho. But even the throwaway ponchos that are like less than $1 at a lot of places, they're so lightweight. It's not really an issue. A tarp, all kinds of tarps out there. This is where you can definitely spend a lot of money or a little money, or have something that's really, really durable that's going to last you 10, 20 years, or something that will not last you much more than one outing. So you're going to have to look into this. You have to learn about the different materials and, learn about what size you need and all this. There's a lot to do with tarps. Very important. Some people like to have multiple tarps for different reasons. Maybe one for a drop cloth and one as the actual overhead protection and so forth. So we also have like the idea that this is just for some people that they really prefer to have a spare pair of footwear. Maybe you don't typically wear your boots, but if you had to bug out, maybe your hiking boots are what you would really prefer to have. So, keeping those with your bug out bag makes a lot of sense. Also, Mylar blankets, and they have Mylar ponchos. Those can be very helpful. Plastic sheeting, hammocks. There's all kind of hammock systems. Once again, we're kind of looking at just bare bones as much as possible for the bag, but these are just suggestions, and that's just something that could be a lot easier to put up than a tent. And there you go. Now, I'm not saying that all tents are bad. There are some very simple one-person tents or, whatever size tent you need that's out there. But they have some that are like minimalistic and that weigh literally like a pound or so. And so, the sky's the limit on some of this. You just have to keep looking and find what you need. But there are also a lot of tents that are very heavy and very bulky that makes no sense to have in a bug out bag, especially if you only have to travel like one day to get to a location. You may not even have any plans, or it may not even make sense to even make camp anywhere or even stop. So you also have this thought about blankets. Now, this might be a little bit more important if it's cold weather, of course. And especially if it is cold weather, definitely a wool blanket. And of course, this is really, something that's going to be important if you're going to be, spending maybe a night or two out in the elements before you can get to your safe, location. Hand warmers. I've never been that big of a fan of hand warmers. The hand warmers, to me personally, are kind of, I'm not saying they're gimmicky. They do help a lot of people. I have tried them out before, but I just never kept them in my kits. I may revisit that in the future, but I know a lot of people that put hand and foot warmers and all that. There's even like body warmers now. Some of them even like use batteries, but the ones I'm really talking about here are the chemical reaction ones that I think you like shake or twist or whatever, and it activates a chemical reaction and it puts out heat. I can see that maybe just as like a backup means to kind of keep yourself from having hypothermia and something like that. But let's move on. We have toilet paper. You don't need to carry like a whole case of toilet paper now. I know some people love their toilet paper, but you can go real basic with this. You can go with like a small roll or a half a roll. I know some people who, are always trying to cut weight in their bag, and they literally just kind of pull off maybe 10, 15 sheets of toilet paper and put that in a Ziploc bag, and they call it a day. Wet wipes. Now, this can be kind of heavy if you go with the whole pack. Once again, you can just pull a few wet wipes out of a packet and put it in like a resealable plastic bag, and you have something. Napkins or tissues. Some people like that. Other people just don't really care. Let's move on. And next is food. Of course, if we're talking about just a few hours or just a couple of days, you don't really need to get elaborate and have a big cook set systems and stoves and all this. This is not really a long-term survival kit at all in any shape or way or form. This is just basically getting you from A to B. And so I would just look at ready to eat type of food. It could just be bars, different types of food bars. But there's no real reason why you would want to have some kind of like big packets of like freeze dried food. You could, but you're going to have to cook that stuff and get some kind of fire going or boil some water or at least at the very minimum, soak things in water for a time period. It's kind of not really, optimum. So literally just a handful of food bars might be all you really need or what makes sense in that situation. Pretty much anyone can go almost a whole day without almost any problems without food. As long as you're drinking enough water, you might get a little tired toward the end of the day a little bit earlier than normal, or you might start to get a little bit of a headache, or some people get a little bit weak and a little shaky if it's been almost a whole day since, or 24 hours or so since they've eaten. but it's not like, people are going to just start dropping dead. It's just not like that. I personally fast on a regular basis, sometimes as much as twice a week. And I mean, I've gotten really used to going 16 to 20 hours without eating. And I will say that I'm starting to get pretty hungry around like 18, 19 hours in. But it's not like I'm like falling apart, And I think it's good to condition your body a bit like that, to be a little bit more used to skipping a meal or two. Not that I'm saying it's the best for you to skip meals, but I think you should have like the ability to do it. And so to skip 2 to 3 meals should be something you can do without having like some kind of issue. And so, yeah, for me, what I do is about every 4 to 6 months, I just take everything out of my bug out bag and go through it and make sure that all my meds are up to date, nothing broke inside the bag. And when it comes to food, kind of just make sure that all the food is taken out and replaced with something as fresh as possible. So I know for a fact that, okay, over the course of the next 6 months, I'm good to go if I need the bag. And there's not going to be any kind of questions about it. Water, there's a lot of people who don't keep any real water in their bag. It's kind of I think it's wrong in some level. I think you should keep some water in there. I'm not talking about like 20 gallons of water. I mean, that's ridiculous. Even a gallon of water, unless you live like in a desert, then I can understand that. You might even want more than a gallon of water if you live right in a desert zone. But I certainly don't live in a desert. There's ponds and lakes, and even relatively speaking, a river not that far away. So I kind of don't really have justification to carry a bunch of water, but I think having some water makes sense. So maybe 1 or 2, relatively compact bottles of water makes sense. And then, having a water container that you can actually add more to your system, or a water bladder, makes a lot of sense. Metal containers, at least have one metal container. I know that they are heavier than plastic containers. But even if it's just like a metal cup, something that you can boil water if you had to. But I think that, the way that I would go for the most part would be just to have like the most compact water filter that I felt comfortable with. I'm not the biggest fan of like chemical tabs for like water sanitation. I'm not sure about you, but if you've actually tried those, they taste nasty. And I really don't want that stuff in my body, the chemicals. In a pinch, you just do what you have to do. But it's pretty nasty. And so I'm not a fan of that. And I kind of basically stopped putting chemical, tablets for water sanitation, or whatever you want to call it, in my bags a while back. I think I stopped maybe 4 or 5 years ago, stopped using those. But I'm not saying, you can't use them. I'm just saying I'm not a fan of them. And I think it's really good, as much as I don't really personally do candy or gum and things like that. I just don't do them. But I think it's kind of good, though, to maybe have some of it in your bag. Whatever it is that you don't mind, chewing on or chomping or whatever. I mean, everybody has their vices. Some people just love chocolate. So you might want to find some chocolate that doesn't melt very easy and that tastes good to you, and put maybe a few little bars in there, spread out through your bag. Once again, if you like mints, put some mints in there. Just some things to kind of maybe, boost your morale, per se. Okay, let's move on. The next would be a whistle. It's pretty common sense for this. I mean, a whistle is going to get someone's attention. You can kind of set up codes, and you can communicate with others over distances. Especially if you're injured, you want to have something to get someone's attention that you need help and all that. Signal mirror is pretty much the same, but it's even more versatile in my opinion, because not only can you signal with the signal mirror, but you can use the mirror itself to identify parts of your body that you can't see very easily with your eyes, and check, on various bug bites or wounds or things like that. It's pretty cool. Okay, compass. For me personally, though, when I think of putting together a navigation kit, it's going to be a decent map of the local area, and then also a map of the regional area. I think they're both really good. And when possible, a topographical map makes a lot of sense. Of course, have a nice mat pouch that is waterproof. Definitely do that. And I'm not talking about water resistant. You really want a true waterproof pouch. And they do make them out there. Sometimes they're a little bit more expensive than the cheap ones out there, but it's worthwhile. But when it comes to the compass, it's good to have two so that you can compare each one and kind of get confirmation that what you're seeing is real. Sometimes compasses can go wrong, or they can be influenced by the environment. You may not be paying attention, and you might have some kind of something made of metal that's nearby and throwing off the compass or whatever. And if you have two of them, you can set them in two separate locations. I'm not saying that you have to put them real far away from each other, but maybe a foot or two away from each other, and you can get confirmation that your main compass is telling you the truth. Now, a lot of people are like, man, that's old school. I'm not going to do no compass. Well, at least have it as a backup, man. But if you're like most people I know, they're like, I have a GPS. And I'm not talking about like the GPS that you can find in a phone. I'm talking about like a standalone GPS. And that's fine too. I mean, just kind of know that sometimes things fail, even that. And sometimes the batteries might go out, so have spare batteries and all these things. So just be aware that it's not perfect, but, GPS, they are pretty accurate, Let's jump on to the next one, and that's the pencil. Some people like pens, but the pencil is like kind of foolproof. Like you can always just take out your pocket knife and kind of sharpen your pencil. And I kind of like that. I kind of just like how the utility of a pencil. And you can like cut pencils in half or in thirds. And so you can have like several small little pencils spread out, and it's not going to really be bulky or heavy or nothing like that. But definitely, I think having at least a couple of pencils. Paper. And the way that I pretty much keep paper in my bug out bag is I just have like a couple of notepads. It's better if you can get those that are like, water resistant, like the Write in the Rain brand. And there's a couple others as well. They have like treated paper, and those are cool. A little expensive in my opinion, but I mean, it is what it is. But yeah, definitely have something that you can write down notes or draw a little map. Whatever. Maybe you just have certain thoughts about something and you just want to jot them down. And, in particular, though, if in a bug out situation, you may be wanting to record various landmarks just to kind of like keep track with yourself where exactly you are. You may have traveled the route multiple times, but you may have never traveled in the middle of the night. So it might be good to kind of just take notes of landmarks, especially if it's a longer journey on foot. Now, we have things like your headlamp, which in my opinion is better than a flashlight, but also you might want to consider a flashlight. Some people like the flashlights that have the angled head so that you can kind of clip them on, like, for example, your backpack, and it'll be the head of the flashlight is facing forward. So you have different types of flashlights. And once again, the 90-degree head on some of those are becoming a little more popular. People really like those. But you kind of just have to figure out your preference. But I think that hands down for most people, it's just going to be a really good, efficient LED, multi-mode, even multicolor headlamp. And you don't have to go over the top with this and get something that puts out 10,000 lumens and has this massive battery pack that sits on the back of your head, and it has like all these straps to hold it down, and it weighs 10 pounds. It's just ridiculous. You don't need that kind of headlamp, right? So what you can do is just start looking for something that is lightweight, affordable, waterproof, or at least gives you some kind of decent water resistance, right? And that it has a proven track record. I mean, that's pretty much the best that you can do, right? Let's move on to batteries. You want extra batteries for all electronics. That goes without saying, but I'm just bringing it up because people sometimes forget to put batteries in there. There's a big debate. Should you have all your devices use the same type of battery, or should you have them using all different types of batteries? Because some people are worried that they run out and then they're forced to forage or barter with someone. And maybe that person only has certain types of batteries. And if you don't have options, then you're in trouble. And so I don't know. I've kind of gone through this a few times, but it is nice to have a few devices that use different types of batteries, but there's a possibility that you won't find anybody to do a barter and trade. So I have come to the conclusion that for the most part, if you can kind of consolidate to one type of battery, for example, a AA battery, which is the world's most common size battery. I mean, if you can find all your electronics in AA, that would be probably the ultimate. Now, even within AA, though, you can get lithium AA, you can get rechargeables, you can get alkaline, all different types, right? So there's a lot there. So definitely look into that. Your fire kit. This doesn't have to be that complicated. I do have full comprehensive videos talking about fire kits and showing my fire kits and doing demos. Some of those videos are a little bit older than others, but they're out there. But when it comes to this, it's just real simple. If you just want to have a basic fire kit, have an assorted number of fire starters. So maybe you have some matches in a waterproof match case, have a couple lighters, have fire steels, have a magnifier. Just, have like at least three different ways. And have some tinder. So many people have all these fire starters in their fire kit, but no tinder. And guess what? You might find yourself in the middle of a rainstorm and everything is completely soaked, including yourself. And you're trying to get warm and you're trying to avoid hypothermia. And you don't have any kind of dry substance to get it going. So you definitely want tinder. And once again, just like your fire starters, you probably want to have multiple options, right? You don't want to just have a little bit of tree bark. You might want to have some other stuff. I'd have 3 or 4 at least. That's just me though. Okay. And then have like a waterproof pouch to put all this in. Now, some people say that they can't really find one. You can also just get another mat pouch, right? If you can make a fire kit out of a mat pouch. But for those who just want to use like kind of a standard pouch, you can use like resealable plastic bags, kind of like Ziploc bags, to put all your fire kit, supplies in each of those bags. You can even double bag them and then put them in your pouch. And that would pretty much be good enough for most situations. Instead of like using binoculars or carrying those, because they can be a lot more heavy and bulky, you can find really small and lightweight binoculars out there. And some of them are not that expensive at all. So that's just something you may ask, like, why would you need binoculars or anything like that? Well, sometimes it's good to kind of see ahead of you so that you can make plans. And if you couldn't see that massive river and you kind of walk down there to see what it really was, then, you could have wasted a lot of energy and time because you may have to go around it. And basically, there's a lot of things like that. You can kind of avoid doing a lot of unnecessary things. Or maybe there's threats up ahead of you. Maybe there's people that are doing things. Maybe there's a gang of people doing criminal activity and you can see them from a distance so that you can avoid them. Just things like that. Or maybe you're like the scout of the group and you're way ahead of your group. And then you can turn around and look back and see where your people are. And then you can just kind of wait until they catch up with you. Lots of reason for that. So you have also flares. Flares are really good to have. Nowadays, people kind of avoid those in their bag, and I kind of do that too. I mean, I do carry one flare though, but I used to carry a bunch of flares. And I'm talking like the really good Coast Guard flares that they use on boats and stuff. But it's up to you. It can be a hazard. I mean, there can be an accident and you could just burn up your whole bug out bag. But just if you're going to get some flares, make sure they have safety caps and that you know how to use them and how to store them properly and all that. And you definitely don't want them to just be loose in your bag. I mean, you want them contained and cushioned and all that. Chem lights, you don't go to your dollar store and expect to find good chem lights. And they call them like glow sticks there. But I mean, when you actually have real commercial grade safety chem lights or mil spec chem lights, you'll know the difference. And that's because they do typically last a lot longer. They're a lot brighter, or they're just a lot better. They're just, better built. So some people get really heavy on the chem lights. Some people don't like them at all, but I think that they are worth it. At least having one or two as a backup in case you do run out of batteries in your light, which is probably not going to really happen if you're only out for like a day or two on, traveling. But it could be used as a marker. It could be used for a lot of things, though. You can signal with chem lights. There's a lot of things to look into with those. So they're so lightweight, and you can get them now like in a very, very small form factor, and they come almost in any color now. So if you're just looking for the brightest color, it's the green. The green is typically the brightest color when it comes to chem lights. Now, resealable plastic bags, absolutely. You can go with name brand or generics or whatever you feel like is good. Some people like to get the really thick. I mean, they have different thicknesses too, especially when you start to look at like commercial grade resealable plastic bags. Some people like to double or even triple bag things, which really increase the chances of keeping things dry and protecting those items that need to be dry. Garbage bags. Now, when I speak of this, I'm really talking about like the contractor yard bags, like the really thick mill bags. Now, there's different ones out there. Once again, I mean, there's all kinds of thicknesses. So you just kind of have to experiment. I don't really want to sit here and tell you, oh, you have to get the 3 mil or the 5 mil or whatever. Those might not even be available in your area. But whatever is available, you have to just experiment on what's going to be the best that will work for you. But it's an amazing thing when you get the really heavy duty stuff. You can see it's just like night and day compared to your regular garbage bags. So you have that magnifying glass. You can start fires with that. That could be part of your fire kit. I just have it as a standalone though. Sometimes you kind of want to magnify something to see like a wound or a splinter, or to maybe just look at something for whatever reason. Maybe there's one of your electronics broke, or there's a loose connection. You can kind of look in there on the circuit board and see if you can find the problem. Maybe you can repair it. Ranger bands. Anyone that's aware of what this is, you know what I'm talking about. Basically, you can take inner tubes and cut them up into like these bands, and you can use them as like heavy duty rubber bands. You can use them for a lot of things, though. I mean, there's a super long list. You could probably write a whole book about just things you can use Ranger bands for. Zip ties. This is another thing that a lot of people don't really understand the full range of offerings with zip ties. Zip ties come in metal, materials. So you can get literally like metal zip ties. You can get them in polymer. You can get them in all different types of materials. And you can also get them in different strengths. I have some that are rated for like 180 pounds, and they use a type of DuPont polymer. And this polymer is just unbelievably strong. Some zip ties are made to be reused, and others are like a one-time use. So you got to check it all out. Signal panel. This can just be as simple, really, though, as like a brightly colored bandana. But there are signal panels that are, designed specifically for signaling, obviously, but there's definitely a lot of that out there. So you can kind of look into this. Now, if you're bugging out and you have a location to go to, it's very unlikely that you're going to try to want to bring attention to yourself unless you were really like desperate for help because you've injured yourself or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, signal panels can be used for a lot of other things as well than just signaling. I mean, you could, especially if it's made of a certain material, you could use it as a pre-filter to, pre-filter out some debris from your water and all that. This has been out for a while now, but a lot of people really don't give it a lot of attention. I think that the military kind of typically uses this. A lot of civilians don't really get into this so much, but it is out there. But these things are still not that cheap. And this is different types of signal lasers. And very powerful lasers. They go a number of miles, and some of them have different like filters at the end that would kind of disperse or make little symbols in the sky. Some of them are just different colors. Some of them pulse and they have different sequences. Basically, if you're trying to get attention to a search aircraft, you could use something like this. But once again, for most of us, we don't really have an application. We probably won't have airplanes looking for us. Trail markers. If you're bugging out, I'm not so sure why you want to do this unless you get lost or you get turned around or maybe you have to do a detour for whatever reason and you don't want to get lost. This could be something in case you just need to backtrack because you can't find your way through to find where you're trying to go. It is something to consider, but I think once again, most people probably know one or two routes, and that's just something that's really important as well, to have at least two routes to get to where you're going. I think it's even better to have more than that. And that's why it's good to have a map with you so you can have your primary route. If that's not an option, go to your secondary. And I really think in my world, having three is kind of the way to go. So have a tertiary route. And I mean, if it's so bad that all three routes are not going to be able to be used, you just might not be able to get there anyways. But it's just good to have options when it comes to that. Silicone tubing. You don't hear a lot about this, but sometimes you need to siphon things like fuel, things like that. Now, some of this kind of gets a little iffy about legality, and I'm not saying do anything illegal because I'm not into that at all. But I'm just saying in a real SHTF situation, maybe you come across an abandoned vehicle and you have a car that's next to that vehicle that does work, but it's just out of gas. Maybe you have to siphon a little bit. Maybe you need the tubing to extract water. Maybe there's all kinds of reasons that you can use tubing, but I would go with like food grade silicone tubing, and I wouldn't go so narrow, but I wouldn't go so wide as well. And you might want to practice the art of siphoning, like water from a source with the tube. So you have that. In terms of tools, I got just a small list here of tools, and that could be like a handsaw. I think that a lightweight, compact handsaw is probably not going to even be needed, but it's a lot better than carrying on like a big axe or even a hatchet. Now, I have the hatchet on the list, but really it's something I would never even personally consider. I personally just, have like a Botco Laplander, a little handsaw. It's very lightweight, but still even that really is overkill because it's only really to kind of break down small limbs and stuff for a quick campfire if I just needed that to get warmed up, or if I had some kind of animal like a wolf or something follow me on the trail and I needed to kind of just scare it off, make a little fire. So that's kind of like the extent really for a handsaw. Camp knife, once again, it may not be necessary for a bug out bag. Some people like it. It makes them feel more comfortable that they have a bigger knife, but really, it could just be your pocket knife or a blade on your multi-tool, which is another thing to consider. That might just be all the blade you really need. When it comes to multi-tools, though, that's something that we have to be really aware of, that multi-tools come in so many different formats these days. There's like so many options. It's unreal. And so be aware of the weight and the bulk on some of those. Some of that is just really not worthwhile carrying. Cordage. There's like a lot of debate about what is the perfect cordage. It typically bounces from bank line, like good quality, medium weight, tarred bank line, and type 3 paracord. Some people like to go up to type 4 paracord, but those two are the kind of the more popular in the world of preparedness, So there's other options though. So don't just settle with those two if you feel like that you need something else. But for the most part, for most needs, those can solve a lot of problems. Tape, you almost can't really talk about cordage without tape. They kind of almost go hand in hand because they can do a lot of the same thing. In fact, you can make cordage out of tape. But when it comes to tape, though, I mean, we're not talking about masking tape. And for the most part, like electrical tape really isn't good enough for most applications. It really comes down to, there's different kinds that I'm going to probably not speak of. So I don't want you to think that I'm being, completely inclusive here. Or I should say like completely like, comprehensive about this topic of tape. But I think that duct tape is a better way to go, but just generic duck brand duct tape is pretty, pathetic. So what I do is I just get the original standard Gorilla tape, and I mean, I've had no problems. I think that really is the way to go. That's just the standard for me for duct tape. Some people like T-Rex tape, but really, if you look at the test, it's not as strong as Gorilla tape. Some people like a little bit of fiberglass in their tape, so they go with like Hurricane tape. I don't go with that because it doesn't have the flex. It's a lot more prone to be difficult to work with. So I just go with Gorilla tape. A folding shovel, man, those things are bulky and they are still heavy. Even when you get some of the lighter ones on the market, they're still a few pounds typically. I don't recommend it, but I mean, maybe you just for some reason need a shovel. Pry bar. I used to carry like a full-size pry bar years ago in my bug out bag, and I'm like, wow. It wasn't really that bulky at all. It was just heavy. It was heavy. And it was over a pound, that's for sure. It probably was a couple pounds or more. But and then I downgraded to a medium-sized pry bar, and now I pretty much just have like a little, like it's about the size of my hand, just a little handheld pry bar, and that's good enough for me now. I'm done with that. I probably won't even use that, but especially for those who live in urban areas, it definitely could be something that could be useful. Now, where I live, though, I don't know so much. I don't know. I think that probably the only times I'd probably even use it if I just had to, for some reason, gain access to an outbuilding, for example. It could be like a barn or a shed or a garage or something that had like a padlock or something. Maybe I could pry the hasp off the building, or I don't know, something like that. Only in a worst case scenario. I would never, of course, want to do that if there was no need to do that. But I mean, it was like life and death, and you're trying to protect someone or keep someone from dying or something, and you're just needing some, immediate emergency shelter. Then having something like that to gain access, it's not the worst thing at all. And I also want to just throw in there real quick another kind of emergency provision. It could be a Silcock key for those who live in urban areas to gain access to water from commercial buildings. It could be a lockpick set. You're going to have to practice with that, to really know how to use it. But that's something. Once again, only use it, to save and protect life. And handcuffs could be something if you have to detain someone. I mean, it's just something. You could also use zip ties to restrain someone, but handcuffs could be used. I think the zip ties are a little better in some sense because they're so much easier to carry, a lot lighter weight and just easier to get a hold of and find than handcuffs. But even if you don't have handcuffs, you definitely want to carry at least one set of handcuff keys in case someone tries to detain you unlawfully. You have hearing protection, and we're not talking like these massive over-the-ear muffs and stuff like that. I'm talking about it could just be something as simple as little foam plugs. For whatever reason, you might need hearing protection. It's probably unlikely, but I mean, it's just something that's, it weighs almost literally nothing and takes up pretty much no space. When we talked about earlier about gloves and stuff, or at least we were kind of hinting toward, I should say, when we're talking about like rain gear and just other types of clothing. And that's something that we do need to have, at least some kind of gloves. I mean, it doesn't have to be exactly work gloves, but I think you definitely want something that can take a little bit of a beating. So yeah, I probably would have some work gloves, but it doesn't have to be work gloves. Just have some kind of decent gloves that aren't going to be too oversized, that you can have some good dexterity and some kind of control over what you're handling. You don't want some gloves that are so bulky and extra padded that you can't really manipulate things in your hands. Headwear, a good sun hat. I mean, I love boonie hats. Now, of course, if it's cold out, definitely a good wool toboggan or something like that would make a lot more sense. But just depending on, what's going on at that time of the year. But headwear, it's just really good to protect your head from excessive sunlight or bugs or whatever. Safety glasses. Yeah. So you can basically just get safety glasses and get them tinted to the color and the shade you want and use them as sunglasses, but they also have the safety element to them. It's very important, I'd say, to have those, especially if you're like having to cut through like a very thick piece of woods, or even if you're on a cut trail. You might be surprised sometimes, There could be a branch that's hanging low and you don't pay attention really because you're busy thinking about something and you run right into this branch, even though you're on the trail. So you can really protect your eyes, save your eyes really, when you have safety glasses. That's something that I'm pretty much always doing these days, is that when I go out in the woods, I'll put my safety glasses on and my boonie hat. And the brim of my boonie hat gives me a little bit of a buffer. So if I'm like coming into a branch that I didn't see, I can kind of feel it on my hat first, and then I can stop before it just slams into my head or tries to go into my eyes. And if it does try to go around my eyes, I got the safety glasses. When it comes to like personal protective gear, I'm just going to kind of some of this that we just talked about is protective gear. But, in the more like traditional form of definition, taser, baton, pepper gel, pepper spray, maybe a firearm, obviously have extra magazines if you need that, and ammunition. And then of course, like health protective gear as well, instead of just like protective gear from other people per se. It could be an N95 mask or even an NBC mask. Now that could be really over the top for most people, but I'm not going to say it's wrong to have that. In the world we live, that could be the threat that we're trying to get away from. Maybe something really bad happens and there is a nuclear emergency. Maybe there's radiation exposures coming from somewhere. Maybe you just need that protection until you can get to a safe location. So it's something. They do have NBC masks that are compact and lightweight. I would probably, for the most part, if I'm carrying one of those, have an outside pouch on my bag so it's really easily accessible for me to put on or take off and put back away. That's just my thinking on that. Just like my trauma kit, I don't really want my trauma kit to be buried at the bottom of my bag. So there are some things that are really kind of like high in importance. So have it available if you need it. Let's jump over here to communications and just talk real briefly here that two-way radios, unless you're with a group, then I don't know if you really need that. I mean, you can talk to other groups maybe if that's available, but it just depends on your situation. If you're with your family and you don't want to get split up, maybe there's something happens that makes you split up a little bit for temporarily, then having two-way radios is a really good thing. And I wouldn't just rely on your cell phones. That service could go out any time during an emergency, but definitely have at least at the minimum AM, FM, and weather band radios, like little receivers. And if you can get them with like shortwave capability, it's even better to receive farther away transmissions. Satellite phones. Most people can't afford this. It's something that's well out of my reach. I don't even know if I really would ever need it, but it is something that you can make a phone call to an area that's not affected. For example, maybe it's just a local emergency. Maybe there was just, maybe you live next to a nuclear power plant, right? And there's damage and there's all kinds of stuff going on maybe there was like a really bad storm system that tore up the whole area. And so the grid is down. You can't make phone calls with your cell phone, but you also have this nuclear threat, radiation's coming out of the nuclear power plant, and you wanting to call someone to kind of help you. Maybe they can meet you halfway so you don't have to travel so far on foot. And maybe a satellite phone for that could be life-saving. But once again, satellite phones are not cheap. The plans are not cheap, and it's not so common to find, but they're out there. So yeah, definitely having your cell phone and maybe a spare battery is a big bonus here. Is obviously something you'd want to have. A charger, and even going further is to have a solar charger. Some of those now are really compact, but they're actually doing pretty good and being pretty efficient. And a battery bank, keeping your battery bank topped off. This is something that maybe you could have on a regular basis, something that you kind of top off in your bug out bag. Maybe on an outer pocket or pouch, you could have, your battery bank. And maybe it's something that like every 2 weeks on your calendar, you simply take it out, you top it off, and that's it. And then you'd be good to go. Having some extra currency. So having some money, just put some money away. And I wouldn't just stash it all in one pocket, for example. I'd probably hide it throughout the bag, right? And that's something that's going to help. Now, how much should you put in there? I mean, that's up to you. Most likely, though, if you're just going from point A to point B, and if it just takes a day or two to do that, it'd probably only be like if something happens unexpected that you'll have to like maybe pay someone to help you do something, or maybe you have to buy more supplies or something. Then that could happen, but most likely you'll be okay. But it'd be good though to have, I think, at least a couple $100 if you ask me. Okay, here's some other things to consider. Photos or pictures of loved ones, just for morale, especially if you have a long distance to travel. Copies of your ID and bank and insurance information. I'd have all that though, like on a thumb drive or a USB drive, and have that encrypted so other people can't just access it easily. I'd also have like a copy of a few pages from your favorite book. Once again, as a thing, kind of like a morale boost. And, if you're, spiritual at all and you have a certain type of spiritual document that you gravitate toward, then, definitely having maybe that written down, so that you can easily access it, and read it and kind of feel better. It'll give you more hope and strength. When it comes to the fishing kit, because I really didn't talk about this really at all yet. We're not typically going to be like, I definitely left out trapping and hunting for the most part, because we're not going to be hanging around anywhere long enough. We're supposed to be mobile. Like we're on our foot. We're in transit. This whole situation is about moving and getting somewhere. So we're not like making base camp. We're not making like this big hunting, expedition. And when it comes to fishing though, it's kind of, there might be like an opportunity if you're just going to sit for, maybe like a half an hour to an hour to catch your breath or to eat a small quick meal. You could possibly throw a line out into the pond. If you just happen to be next to a pond or a lake or a river, you could throw a line out and just see if you catch something. And if you do, you can save it until the next meal, or go ahead and cook it up and have a little more food right there. It is an option. And so whatever it is that you need to make a little fishing kit, then you do that. A transponder. For me, I think that's a little over the top for sure for like probably 99% of people. But if you live in a really rural area and you got injured when you're bugging out, you probably want, someone to know where you're at to help you. So it's something there to think about. A walking stick definitely can be used not only to stabilize yourself, right? But it can also be used to defend yourself from animals and humans. And then, of course, we don't want to forget the backpack itself. You have to put all this stuff in somewhere. And the backpack typically is the most efficient way to carry stuff on your person, is on your back. So, yeah, look into that. There's a whole world of backpacks to look over. Now, there's one more thing before I want to talk about barter and trade. I know this video it's not a short video, but this is an important video, right? Especially for beginners. And this is that to have an essentials kit in your bug out bag, or at least somewhere that you can keep it with your bug out bag. So maybe you don't even keep it with it, but maybe it's some kind of kit system that you can wear on your person. Maybe it's a pouch that you can keep in a pocket that has essentials. And I'm talking more like a survival kit essentials, or maybe it's like a waistband, or a waist pack. And that's pretty much how I have my setup. It's a waist pack survival kit, and it basically just has all your essentials. I can make fire from it. I have a couple extra, bars of food, things like that. A little mini water filter, just little things to get me going. Just at least get me to where I'm trying to go. In an emergency, in case I'm separated from my bag. The bag could be stolen. It could be damaged. It could be whatever. Maybe I'm injured and I can't carry the bag anymore. It's just too heavy. And so maybe I grab a couple things out of the bag, and then I keep my essentials kit on me and then just go forward. So that's pretty much the bag there. But I do want to talk about barter and trade as some things, especially if you have a long journey and you have a higher likelihood of encountering other people along the way, which I would encourage you to find routes that has the least amount of potential to run into someone. But there might be situations you see other people. So what kind of things would be good to barter with in case you needed something, or maybe just to help others? This is a very short list, and I will be honest with you, I didn't put a lot of thought into this one. This is just kind of just touching the surface of the topic. So there's definitely a lot of other things you could consider. But these are just the ones I come up with in a short amount of time. A spare lighter, extra food. And what I mean by that, I'm talking like, not like a whole bunch of extra, not like pounds of food, but maybe like a few extra food bars. Batteries. Once again, the most common battery in the world is the AA battery, followed by the AAA battery. Hooks for fishing or a fishing line. Those don't take up almost any room, and you could easily put a few spare, though, in your bag. Candy, gum, and mints. In particular, chocolate. I think that there's going to be a lot of people looking for chocolate. You can get those really small bottles of alcohol. I personally don't drink alcohol, so I don't know like a lot about brands and things, but you can definitely get some small bottles of alcohol for consumption. Also disinfectants. I think it would be pretty, especially for people that might be injured that need to clean a wound site, that people would probably be willing to trade quite a bit for disinfectant. And bandages, antibiotics. Antibiotics might not be something you can get really a hold of a lot right now, but if you do have like, a week's worth or so that you could give to someone to fight off an infection and to save their life, that would be really awesome. And pain medicines would be something that I think certain people would be really inclined to trade a lot for if they're in pain. So those are just a few items, just kind of thinking about barter and trade. This is my list. Once again, this is not like some type of comprehensive list. This is just kind of brainstorming and just talking out loud, basically thinking out loud, I guess you could call all this, about various options to consider. And I hope this helps. If you have any like thoughts or suggestions as well, feel free to contribute to this list. I would love to hear your thoughts. I could definitely go on quite a bit more about this. I could probably, write another 100 item list to add to this, but there was some point that I had to stop because I didn't want this to be like multi-hours long. But thanks again for your support. Catch you later. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.